Hello, everyone. Oh, crikey. There's too much syrup in my cordial. How are you all doing? It's episode 216 of Rail Natter, what to do about rail in the West Midlands. This one is going to be potentially... oh my goodness. Martha, what are you doing? Are you stuck on the Settle Carlisle line? There are shenanigans currently going on the over the west side of the country, thanks to some stuff going on. I've no idea what exactly has happened, but a freight train has done a whoopsie. It's not necessarily the freight train's fault, but there is a freight train whoopsied, and it's causing some headaches right now. So, yes, I'm here. Sorry about this. Firstly, thanks for your patience of me being away last week. And hello to everyone. For all sorts of reasons, it's a good job an episode didn't go out last week. Maybe more on that in the future. For now, we're talking about... what are we talking about? We're talking about, well, a while back, and we're talking quite a while back in the... kind of in the days when the integrated rail plan was being discussed and long-term future of HS2 was already in question. Moore Street, the role of Moore Street adjacent to Curzon Street here. So let's tell you what. Let's first of all do this. So this is Curzon Street as kind of broadly proposed, and this is fancy Moore Street here. The little footbridge here, which is a very good idea to kind of provide some connectivity. Expansion of Moore Street station itself, so kind of adding some platforms, generally expanding the station to increase suburban capacity. So this was kind of tied into this came about, but there are other discussions going on. There's discussions about Midlands Hub and about Midlands Engine Rail and all these sorts of discussions. So I thought it'd be useful to kind of cut through all of that and just jump to a document from October 2022, which is Network Rail's, well, actually, it's this thing. Here it is. It's the West Midlands Strategic Advice, provided by the North West and Central kind of development team. There's a lot in here, and I think it'd be very interesting to pick through it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. There's a lot. There is so much in that document, and I don't exactly know how we're going to pick through it, and whether we'll kind of do a good clumps here and there and pull out what we can, skip to the end. We might even use some of the executive summary for once to kind of pull out some of that information. There's a lot to pick through. I don't think we're going to get... We're not going to go through every single page in great detail because there's an awful lot of detail in there. But I think it'd be quite interesting. So let's do that. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. As the Intercity 225 has faded away, I'm going to try my very best to keep this to the hour. But, you know, I don't make any promises. Hello, everyone. Yes, it's me. It's Big Face. We're going to store up the news for next week because I want to maximise how much time we spend doing on this, and I want to try and keep it to the hour. Let's see how we can do. We're going to get cracking. Miniaturise my face up in the top corner. This is it. West Midlands Strategic Advice. It's basically a slide deck with loads of information. There are maps, diagrams, all sorts of bits and pieces in there. Without further ado, let's get cracking. We're really going to be as hasty as possible to go through here. Oh yeah, very good point. That's a very good point. Right, okay, I'm going to have to go Big Face now, and this is technically a document, and therefore we have to apply the only recently thought of is it a good idea thing at the end. So I'm going to have to add that literally now. I'm doing it as we speak. I don't know. What do I think of this? It's a good question. I don't actually... Well, I tell you what, I'll mark it by the time we get to the end of it. I will mark it when we get to the end of it. So this is... Thing is, it's kind of a funny one because this is actually... I don't know if I am. This is more like you know what? I'm not going to mark it like this because this is more of like information. It's not Network Rail saying this is our plan. This is Network Rail laying out the information, saying what would be good, what would be quite a good idea to do. So you know what? I'm not going to rank it in the way that I was. So my editing on the fly is for nothing. So let's get back to it, shall we? Let's miniaturize my face and get cracking. So Yeah, what is this? 134, 150, at least 156 pages of stuff here. So yeah, I'm not going to be going through every single bit in detail, but there's quite a lot that we can pick through. And I think basically what we're going to do, we're going to pick bits and pieces here as we go through. There's not a particular structure to this. We're going to pick out bits that we think are interesting. If you spot something, chuck in the chat that you're interested, or if you've looked through this and you're interested to have to pick it up, anything in here that you find interesting, let's pull stuff out of it. Let's understand what's going on. Pick out things that are relevant to today. Perhaps things have changed, perhaps they haven't. Things that look interesting, and we'll try and pick through and see what I can see of what's in here. So there's an executive summary. There's a load of introduction. There's the scope that's obviously rightly has to be defined. There's methodology principles, aspirations for the network. And look, this is good stuff though. Seeing Network Rail being allowed to be aspirational. I know some of the team who are behind this and other documentation. They're a good team in North West and Central, and they are trying to do their best to think about the future. It's a thing that Network Rail should be allowed to do. As it gets transformed into British Rail, absolutely need to be allowed to look into the future and understand what, think aspirationally and think big, frankly, about the future. Really important. People approving and disapproving of maps being posted online. Yeah, well, that's comes straight out of this. So we'll get there. So let's see. Executive summary. There we are. West Midlands Rail Network, heart of Britain's rail network. Oh, that's kind of true in a way that it's kind of true for Manchester as well. Everything hinges on the West Midlands, frankly, the railway lines going through Birmingham. So New Street, Moore Street, Snow Hill, act as important hub and transit route for rail freight. Absolutely true, critically true, in fact. So context, October 2022, things were stabilising, but absolutely weren't quite as confident then as we are now about things returning to normal. I mean, we were, as RailNatter, but generally, in-house strategic rail authority equals Network Rail. Essentially, yeah, it should be within the single major rail authority, which should be British Rail. Long-term rail network planning is required to illustrate how rail can fully contribute to government policy and where investment should be targeted, as well as to inform development of operational railway following the Williams-Schatz plan for rail and the consequent establishment of BR2. Yeah, fine. So this is a bit like a route utilization strategy type situation. People looking at this may well correct me on this one. Martha, where are you? Are you in the chat? Good. No, Martha's not stuck, thankfully. Excellent. Other people are here from Martha's commentary. Yeah, everyone. It's fun that I have guests, but they're not actually live. They're just in the chat, which is always a joy. Martha, it's always a pleasure to have you along. Anyway, so here's one thing. This is a large document, and I'm afraid it's been outputted in web downloadable rather than high-res form, so my goodness, we're rationing pixels. Here are some pixels that represent Bordesley in South Birmingham, which is where there will eventually be two cords connecting in either direction as part of the Midlands. What is it? Is it the rail hub? It's got a silly name, but there's a series of major works going on in Birmingham to kind of unlock the suburban rail network and to allow a better job of segregating different service types, to bring services out of New Street and into Moore Street, to attempt to free up the blockage through Birmingham. I have a suspicion that this document won't be as aspirational as I think we should be in the Birmingham area, but I don't have viewers. I have guests. You are all guests. It's very true. All of you are guests in RailNet. You're absolutely spot on. You're absolutely spot on, Jamie. Yeah, too right. So anyway, right. So there's a nice picture. Basic advice is a collection of known service aspirations which have been organised on a corridor by corridor basis. So this is known service aspirations. So we're not actually talking that long term at this point. This is realistic aspirations that wouldn't get people people in DFT laughing at you. But it's discussing. There are numbers within here, so it's also talking. So the key things that this is talking about is enabling new services and improve connectivity in line with previous assessments undertaken, improving performance and journey times for cross-national service groups, which are routed via the West Midlands, enabling higher frequency, even interval services in the core of the West Midlands in line with the aspirations of the regional network specifier. So that's good. So that's kind of trying to bring the suburban network into being a proper suburban network. Supporting known urban development sites, absolutely, and distributing connectivity more widely through the creation of a set of regional hub stations. Again, good idea. Hub and spoke, distributed hub and spoke system is good. Protecting capacity for freight via the West Midlands, critical to do this, and identifying where improvements can be made to support long-term growth in freight demand, and maximising integration with the HS2 network by prioritising Moore Street as a focal point for interchange with Curzon Street. So it's bringing the main interchange away from New Street and actually to Moore Street to allow a much more natural and easy, crossover. So actually the suburban network being centred in Moore Street helps with enabling people to get from wherever they've travelled to. If we imagine the final HS2 network, not the stub that it is now, getting from wherever they are north, south, into Birmingham and out to where they need to be from that point. So pretty good list of kind of logical steps and outputs here. So there's obviously a lot of chat going through. Fine, we're gonna hammer through here. Introduction, context, and background. I suspect we will hammer through this fairly quickly. So the headlines are, net zero is a theme. William Shatz, lol, when that was still a thing. West Midlands and Chiltern route study. So that's fine. That's kind of the background. The role of the West Midlands rail network in the national picture is a key part of the plan. This is obviously post-integrated rail plan. Yuck. Changes in demand is interesting. Let's see what's said, actually. This is critical. The impact on rail passenger numbers as a result of the pandemic did see a dramatic reduction in passenger numbers, with volumes slow to return on a national scale, in particular in the London and South East commuter markets. This also happened in the West Midlands markets. However, the numbers are recovering quickly, and while peak volumes may not return as they were, they will, and indeed have in a few cases. This may only provide some short-term respite to a system that was already oversubscribed. Peak volumes may not return as they were. I'm interested to see whether that's actually true, because the West Midlands is one of the fastest growing bits of the rail network overall. The ridership, University Station is a good example. There's a station I use quite a lot, absolutely rammed. They've expanded it now, but I suspect that it will still be rammed on busy times. That station, having been fully expanded, will still be stuffed to the gills. Key issues here. The only route with a high level of local-only service frequency of the cross-city line. This is the only real sort of suburban line, proper high-density-ish suburban line. But even then, it's only 6 trains an hour, which is not great, to be honest. And the services aren't, they're not huge trains either. This is the busiest service group in the West Midlands area and appears to have shown the fastest recovery of all lines, even with an irregular 4 trains per hour pattern. Likely need to return to 6 trains per hour as soon as possible to cater for demand. And the frequency is a key stimulus for demand on this corridor, especially the south end of the route. Yeah, that's a key point. The frequency is freedom. Frequency is a key stimulus for demand. I wonder if it's a key stimulus for demand on other corridors. I wonder. Cross-city line should also be looked at as an example of how passenger demand can be stimulated if the traditional rail markets of the last 20 years do not return to the same level as a result of changing travel patterns. The case study demonstrates that high-frequency electric services stimulate demand, and the principles of a high-frequency turn-up-and-go service on other routes in the West Midlands should be central to growing the railway market in the future. Really good stuff. This is absolutely critical, key points to that we cannot that as a rail network as a whole, at a political and a policy level, we refuse to learn these lessons. North West and Central do get it. In the long term, it's anticipated that even in the more pessimistic scenarios, by 2030, the rail network will be carrying the same number of passengers as it was in 2019. That's going to happen sooner, frankly. I suspect that's... 2030 is, 5 years away, but I suspect it's going to happen earlier than that. As it says, but to be fair, they say, even in the more pessimistic scenarios, by 2030, the rail network will be carrying the same number of passengers as it was in 2019. Whilst this may not be distributed in the same way, it demonstrates that there is an imperative to be able to resolve the network capacity issues in the West Midlands in order to cater for however the market develops. Yeah, so good stuff. Geographic scope, fine. This is just covering what the area is. So it's covering kind of Shrewsbury, Telford in the west, and Nuneaton and beyond in the east, up to Stafford, Rugeley, Burton, not as far as Derby, Rugby, Leamington, down to Stratford, Worcester, across. So it's kind of that's the geographical scope. Don't worry about the typo there on geographical. So that's the scope. So useful to know our scope. Jamie Potts is doing, I think, is teasing us by saying, but I did PP at Oxbridge, and I know inducing demand is bad economics. Fart noises, yes, indeed, absolutely. So Purpose of this document is to have a collated view of how best to trade off competing aspirations for the network from a wide array of stakeholders. So it's kind of, you set the stall and then people can challenge it, but it's much easier for those people to say, well, actually, I don't think you've got that quite right. Could you try and rebalance that again? But you've got to have that starting point for people to understand what they could get. So it's absolutely right that these documents, these plans exist. This is why it's so critical to have a plan. This is the sort of document that gets us close to having a plan that people can then challenge and aspire towards and fund. So when we've talked about RailNet, talked in past RailNet ad nauseum about local plans, about locally driven plans. Yes, I mean, this is Network Rail, which is a national organisation, but this is one of the elements of devolution of Network Rail that does make some sense, which is developing regional plans that then fit into the broader whole. It's just that they should be driven as much as possible by the city region and by the wider subnational transport body. But anyway, so fine, okay, let's skip through all this. Methodology and principles. So the content of this document: capacity is defined in two different ways: on-train capacity, the number of passengers a train can carry; network capacity, availability of train passing the network. Fine, yeah, that we understand that. Network capacity, finding an optimal middle ground between journey times, connectivity, and frequency of services. Yes, so this is a bit of a what do we talk about when we talk about prioritization of service? I'm not a huge fan of direct services. I don't think direct services are necessary if you have a high level of frequency, but rightly, this is pointing out that there is a balance between those three. And direct services are shown to have some value in some instances when done correctly. And they can be done correctly if you have a good clock face core. You can do direct services. Thameslink does a lot of that. A lot of direct services that then feed into a very high intensity core. So it is possible to have your cake and eat it on that front. So let's see, journey times. There's all the good stuff here about generalized journey time, which is station to station, bus plus service interval plus some of interchange penalties for interchange. This is all good stuff. If you want to understand this document, I can provide a link to it in the description actually. But this document, a very good way to understand how this stuff is, how you pick through this stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to go through it in detail. So there's lots of stuff here. So where is additional capacity needed? A long-established solution for additional capacity in Birmingham is to utilise land at Moore Street and Snow Hill stations to provide additional platforms and approach tracks, with two new cores linking Moore Street with the Water Orton corridor for services towards the East Midlands and the Camp Hill line for services towards the southwest. This creates two new routing opportunities and up to 5 new platforms. I mean, this is such trivial stuff, isn't it? Like, this is big, important stuff, but it's like big, important stuff in the sense that it's small. In terms of the grand aspirations, what Birmingham actually needs is a Crossrail type project that provides very, very high capacity and bypasses the mess at New Street. That's the ideal situation. I dare say that won't get touched upon here because it would get laughed out of town. But bearing in mind, Birmingham is owed multiple billions, about 10 to 12 billion quid of rail investment per head. To catch up with London's per head equivalent. So that's enough money to pay for a decent kind of Crossrail type service. Anyway, so that's the statement of what that provides. These new routing opportunities don't just create new capacity, but also provide the ability for more rail corridors to have direct access to Moore Street for more convenient interchange with HS2 services. So it's really key that this work happens. This is really critical. This is in line with infrastructure interventions recommended by the Midlands Rail Hub and aligns with the service outputs it seeks to deliver. By the way, do at me if you've got a question for me or a thought that you want me to spot. Do at my name into the chat, because then, or indeed you can do a pay chat, which I've not seen one. No one's done one yet. They shout at me. I have no idea how they shout at me. Anyway, so yes, right. So fine. There are opportunities to utilise these services across the whole network to make better use of the infrastructure to create a network that's easier to understand and use for a passenger, presents new journey opportunities, enables more aspirations to be met, simplifies network operations, which is absolutely key. Fine, good stuff. Hub stations. Key element of how to provide improvements across the board and make the most of capacity is determining where different types of service should call in order to be able to provide a frequent interval service. Better. Okay. Major hubs, like New Street, Coventry, Wolverhampton, fine. Secondary hubs are a station that is an important destination in its own right. So places like Tamworth, Nuneaton, Walsall, Smethwick, Galton Bridge, University. That means potentially not all service types need to call. Local stations, all other stations that don't fit the above categorization. Okay, fine. So they're just discussing types of the way that different patterns and services and hubs and stations all interact with each other. Fine. So you've got the major hubs, you've got the secondary hubs. Fine. These are the decisions that have been made by the area in relation to this. On some corridors, service structure is less well defined, with longer distance services providing local station calls due to the lack of capacity to run additional services, particularly in the direction of Derby and Leicester. So this is with the classic mixed traffic problem where you can't run decent services. The least well defined is on the Wolverhampton corridor, where currently up to 12 trains per hour operate, varying stopping patterns by 4 different operators to provide connectivity and on-train capacity on this corridor, so more comprehensive reorganisation of services will need to be provided. This is the classic HS2 solution, problem solving, where you have corridors that have 125-mile-an-hour long-distance services mixed up with local stopping services and quite a lot in between to boot regional services and so on. So so it's picking up on that point. Access to the city centre and connections via HS2. In some instances, in order to improve the offering of the wider network, some connectivity that exists today will be changed. There'll be mitigations through improved interchange, faster alternatives, or increased frequencies to alternatives, which will be proposed. Absolutely. So this is talking about the stuff I talk about, the fact that HS2 might result in people not having direct services that they once had, but they end up with a better overall picture because they have a higher frequency service that allows them that makes interchange more natural, more comfortable, and easier. So the cross-country network will be amongst the most affected by the introduction of HS2, with the largest flows of the current operation being served by HS2 in the future. This gives the opportunity to reconsider the role of intercity services and whether these present an opportunity to change the way that this is. And I know who may have been writing this. This is exactly the right thing to be talking about, and it's really good to see it written down. October 2022, the sort of thing that should have been getting discussed much earlier as part of HS2's proposals, but nevertheless, this is what this is the key stuff in absolutely critical stuff in rethinking how the existing network operates once HS2 is running. On a more local scale, some local services may have to be changed, either by serving a different principal station or the cross-Birmingham linkage being altered to make a more efficient use of capacity, or to provide stronger strategic links. So fine. So there's lots of stuff for us to be thinking about here. So not via centre connectivity, cross-country opportunity. So this is worth digging into, actually, particularly the cross-country bit. So there's a couple of things that let's see. The current passenger network, so let's start not via centre connectivity. The current passenger network is focused on journeys in all directions, routing via one of the existing central stations in Birmingham. This strategy looks to reduce the need for journeys to have to operate through the centre of Birmingham, especially if it involves doubling back. Yeah, critical. To support in this, there need to be options that link the radial routes to avoid the need for this. The role of released capacity on the West Coast Main Line via the Trent Valley will be a big factor in this. Again, HS2 enabling things. But there are other lines across the region that could fulfill a role, linking hubs together with services that don't operate via central Birmingham. Good stuff. Okay, so cross-country opportunity. The cross-country network serves a series of overlapping flows, as well as significant end-to-end flows. Crucially, the current operations provide important inter-regional cross-Birmingham connections that will continue to play a vital part to completing journeys in the long term. However, the advent of HS2 services, even if the eastern leg of HS2 isn't been built in full, oh damn, it's painful to read stuff like that, means that there is an opportunity to reconsider the structure of the network to maintain the most important through flows whilst addressing some of the inherent issues which with the long-distance service operations that include crap performance on a national scale with delays transmitted over large areas, lack of timetable flexibility as services must hit specific paths through capacity bottlenecks nationally, and extended journey times as schedules are padded to mitigate poor performance. Cross-country, rubbish. It's not cross-country's fault. It's just the way that the cross-country service is wound up. Tim Davis is asking my opinion on the chance of Stadler getting the winning bid for the new South Eastern Suburban stock. I don't think they have the capacity to deliver it. I would love it if Stadler got it, but I just don't think they're that interested in the UK market right now. The announcement of the general election might have helped with that, admittedly, but I'd love them to be Stadlers, but I'm not sure. Alstom are offering they're offering a non-networker derived solution, so we may see something that actually provides level boarding actually is a long-term solution, so that's exciting to me. It's a non-Bombardier train, it's an Alstom train, not a Bombardier train, basically, so that actually the Alstom solution might be quite a good one. Anyway, fine. So let's whiz forwards a little bit, shall we? Aspiration for the network. So I suppose this is probably going to be like a broad brush. It'd be nice if we have these things. So there's a discussion about freight aspirations here, and we can see sort of this nice diagram. Assume number of freight paths per hour across the West Midlands network within standard hour timetable development. So it's giving an idea of how many freight paths. You can see it through Nuneaton. There's a serious core of freight paths. You've got the various classes of freight path as well. So the class 1 is the fast paths, and then all the other classes are... Actually, no, catch me. Am I wrong on that one? Oh, someone else shout in. Howard Meow is saying all services should call it Smethwick Galton Bridge. That's what you call connectivity. Well, indeed. That's good. Thank you, Howard. So, there's just an idea of some of the things in here, and there's also the passenger aspirations. So you've got a load of proposals for new... these are just the broad suggestions, things that just scooping up all the things that have been discussed by politicians, by industry leaders even, some new stations, new and improved connectivity options in here, faster journeys, hoped for. And urban development as well. So some of the master planning that's been going on. So all these things that are absolutely right to pile into a heap and understand how to unpick them and think about what to do. So corridor by corridor breakdown. So we've got a variety of corridors here. So there's just thinking about capacity. So New Street's stuffed really, because no additional capacity is assumed here beyond the scope of the Birmingham New Street resignaling scheme, which will be commissioned in 2023. That was last year. This leaves New Street with 12 through platforms, all of which can be utilised with fully signalled A and B section and the Bay Platform 4C. Fine. Snow Hill. So the Midlands Rail Hub layout is assumed for Snow Hill, which keeps the existing arrangement and reinstates Platform 4 as a through platform in the space of the former Midland Metro platforms. Birmingham Moor Street is assumed, again, it gets four bay platforms on the west side of the formation, 2 bay platforms on the east side, and 2 through platforms with dedicated approach tracks, enabling access from Tyseley through to Snow Hill. Okay, so we're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit here. I'm conscious of this. But you can see there's an allocation here of capacity, and there's some assumptions about platform occupations and turnarounds. So if you've got a terminating train, then it's assuming how many minutes it takes for a train to arrive and get turned around. These are kind of pretty standard numbers in building timetables up. So it's just a bit of stating our assumptions. So this is looking at number of paths per hour at Birmingham New Street. Platforms 1 to 6 and platforms 7 to 12. So in the different directions, you've got... oh, golly. Just shows how complicated New Street is in terms of those flows. Ooh. So, yeah, so basically the segregation of flows at the station enables a more efficient use of capacity, enabling extra trains to operate. So numbers in circle equate to the number of arrivals per hour operating on each corridor approaching the station. Each line represents a return train path per hour. Ooh. So this diagram basically showing what the assumed long-term, the aspirational paths will be at New Street. And this is Moor Street and also Snow Hill because they're connected to each other. That's kind of how that works. So it's showing what you can get in Moor Street and Snow Hill based on the new plan. I was right. Class 1's are express. Thanks, Simon. Class 4 intermodal. And class 6 is the heavy slow stuff. Thanks, Simon. Lovely to have you on here, by the way. It's always nice to have all the friends in the chat. Yeah, Simon, I owe you a conversation at some point about shenanigans. Right, so yeah, right, golly. So this is looking at current paths. Let's have a look. Let's actually be precise about this. This is current arrivals and long-term potential arrivals. So going from 62.5 to 86, possibly 90. This is a decent extra stint, but it's still, we're not talking about doubling. You're talking about, I'm not going to say marginal because it's not marginal. It's just, it's a sizable chunk, but it's still like, this is showing how constrained doing stuff that's broadly still just within the railway boundary. It shows how constraining that is in terms of if you want to really bump the amount of railway, the amount of rail travel flow, you need to do radical stuff. You need to do really big stuff, cross-rail type infrastructure to really bump numbers. So this is looking at the track layout that Midlands Hub provides for in its indicative designs. This is just kind of showing what the track layout actually looks like. And there is a reasonably flexible track layout. The thing is, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's providing Are you getting through? Yeah, okay. So it's ensuring everything can get onto the 2 tracks if it needs to. It's just quite a busy. It's quite a busy layout, really. Yeah, I know there's a team currently. There are lots of different people currently working on pushing this through to later design stages. Anyway, so we're going to start looking at the different corridors. So this is the really busy, messy corridor, the Birmingham to Wolverhampton and either Shrewsbury or Stafford direction. So it's either up the West Coast Main Line or it's out towards Shrewsbury, Aberystwyth, and so on. Very busy, chunky. There's lots of services that run through here. Discussion also the fact that you've got some of the aspirations about the West Midlands rabbit ears metro going on. Another point. Yeah, train length is very important for flow, for getting decent ridership as decent capacity numbers as well. They're running a lot of small trains within those paths, and it's just bonkers. And that often involves resignaling and sometimes involves quite a lot of track remodeling, because if in some instances the lines can't really cope with much longer trains, which is a challenge. So this is when we get into the detail of each corridor, and it's like, whoa, good grief. So you start looking. So here's New Street. And this is flipped on its head. So north is south and south is north. So here's New Street, and then you go through Rolfe Street, Galton Bridge, Sandwell and Dudley. I'm familiar with this from doing journeys in all directions, either to Aberystwyth or up to Scotland. And there's Wolverhampton with the New Street Tame Bridge connection. It's just such a... This is a very congested corridor, and you can see why, because these are a bunch of local stations. Dudley Port becomes more important, as you say, with the West Midlands Metro, but this is a very congested bit of railway, and it's 2 track. It's 2 track, but a railway. It's bonkers. The capacity of the 2-track railway on this route precludes the ability to call more than 4 trains per hour at all stations. Even providing 4 trains per hour at all stations is not possible without affecting the journey times of faster services. For this reason, it's suggested that Tipton is the station that doesn't have the full 4 trains per hour due to its proximity to Dudley Port. Improvement to headways and capacity improvement to Wolverhampton may enable 4 trains per hour to call at all stations on the route. Further, it's not possible to create an even 15-minute stopping pattern, with the all station service having to operate at 20/10 minute intervals. But again, like longer distance services, it's just such a mess. This is a classic example of just a real bloody mess. Long term, there's no practical way to provide additional capacity in this corridor, as the rail corridor is heavily constrained. In order to increase capacity, a new rail corridor will need to be considered. This would enable the ability to serve new areas of the West Midlands with a new rail corridor, provide faster journeys between Wolverhampton and Birmingham, and therefore between Birmingham and Stoke and Shrewsbury, release capacity in the existing corridor for more intensive suburban service, and new station provision between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. So, well, that's interesting. It's like, building your rail, what would be really good is actually to get Open Rail Map up, wouldn't it? So we can sort of see what this is actually looking like. Let's do precisely that. So let's bring this up here and do this. Let's go. We're going in. We're going in, folks. We're going in. We're going in. The bit of railway we're talking about is from New Street. New Street up through. There we are. And just for clarity, this is. You've got all this stuff here, but this is a 2-track railway. 2-track. This is the West Coast Main Line, folks. One bit of it. Kind of essentially the West Coast Main Line is 4-track here. It's just the Trent Valley lines loop around the outside of Brum and bypass it. But we're talking about a line. This should just be a suburban line. It should not have any long distance services on it, or at least the regional services should be smooshed through it. But it's we're talking about a real mess of a railway that's running through here. Before you then get up to there's Dudley Port. There's Dudley Port, as you can see. Come on, computer, catch up. Some loops, but Tipton there, and then you see some bits of former railway floating around here, by the way, but nothing. There's nothing former that's very useful to parallel this really. The Wolverhampton low-level Birmingham Snow Hill is interesting, isn't it? It's like, well, could you make use of that? Probably you could as part of an overall bigger picture thing, but probably not. And then into Wolverhampton and then onwards. So you can see that, like, what on earth do you do to get a new bit of railway through there? What does that even look like? To get from Birmingham up to Wolverhampton with a new bit of line. what does that look like? Oof. Complicated is what it looks like. And ultimately, it's relying on what HS2 can take off that route. So justifying getting rid of as much long distance stuff off that as you possibly can. Tricky is the answer. Very, very tricky. Fully underground is what Jack Elliott's saying. Yeah, very, very tricky. Steal the road. It's just very difficult, isn't it? It's very difficult. So that's one corridor, and the answer to that is, there's not much more you can do without serious new railway line construction. So Birmingham to Rugby via Coventry. This gets directly helped by HS2. So so this corridor covers important commuter flows into Birmingham, as well as long distance flows to Milton Keynes, Watford, and London. The capacity released by HS2 will enable a change to service structures on the West Coast Main Line, and to an extent on this route section too. Fine. So there we go. The need to provide a high number of fast services limits the ability to provide a significant increase in all stations stopping services without infrastructure enhancement. Again, HS2 helps with this, but only if you can be really bold about the existing services. Like, if we're still limited to running lots of non-stop services, then there's only so much you can do. It's one of the problems we've got with HS2 was the fact that it was not able to, there was a pushback on being really radical about what you leave on the existing network. To some extent, that's because HS2 didn't solve everything, but actually a lot of it is pushback on people not wanting to feel like they're downgrading their railway. But it's there really ought to be more radical decisions made on that. So, ahead of providing additional capacity in the corridor, the speed differential between services needs to be reduced. This is a good radical paragraph, though, in order to provide sufficient capacity to move frequencies. This is probably best achieved in the medium term by not operating fast services under 25. But it may be desirable to retain this speed to enable more robust performance in times of perturbation. So, yeah, that's some clever thinking, really. And again, you can see Adderley Park is a station I refer to quite a lot when I talked about HS2. Stetchford, Lea Hall, these are all local suburban stations that should be seeing minimum 6 trains an hour. And they cannot. They absolutely cannot see that. 2 trains per hour at all stations on the route and 4 trains per hour at the busiest intermediate stations. That's just nothing. That's pathetic. 2 trains an hour on suburban stations. That's just rubbish. Do you know, this is the challenge you face. This is a serious challenge being faced here. Whoopsie. Tile hit the T is whizzed over here. It should be over here. Anyway, there. So again, you see the picture of the complexity of this corridor. It's another really complex mixed traffic corridor. HS2 helps on some of these. This corridor is one that HS2 helps even its current guys, but to get the real release, you need the full HS2. Not just the west side, but the east side as well. So next steps, tricky. I wonder what they're proposing as an alternative here. Let's see. Consideration needs to be given to providing enhanced turn-back facilities at Coventry to make terminating a train from the Birmingham direction more viable. That would be useful. So that's one proposal that would help. The service structure is similar to that on the Wolverhampton corridor, and the 2 service groups could potentially operate as through services subject to timetabling constraints. There may be opportunity to link services through the Coventry corridor with those to Walsall at New Street. So it's okay, fine. Having a self-contained West Midlands service group at Northampton would provide for simpler operations between the West Coast Main Line and the West Midlands. Fine. Provision of an element of 4 tracking between Stetchford and Birmingham International would enable a 4 train per hour structure at all stations except Adderley Park, Hampton in Arden and Berkswell. It would also enable the fast services to operate on a 15-minute interval rather than a heavily flighted half-hourly structure. So it'd be less clump everything at once. So you often in timetabling, East Coast Mainland does this very dramatically. You clump, all the fast services disappear off at the start of the hour and whiz off into the distance, clump together. And then the slower ones at the back of that pile, and they disappear off to get caught up by the next hour's fast services, and that kind of is how the timetable ends up looking. So Birmingham to the East Midlands. So this is in Derby direction, well, up to Burton and Trent, and then Nuneaton over towards actually over towards Leicester here is what's going on. So what's the situation here? well, you start seeing an emerging pattern on why this is all so challenging. Oh, look, it's the same story. Oh, an immensely complicated kind of interconnecting pattern of services. Well, the frequencies are a little better here, but not great. Midlands Rail Hub proposes to double the service towards Leicester from Birmingham to 4 trains an hour. It's just such small numbers. There's such a train every 15 minutes. You know, it's really the bare minimum for a suburban service should be 6 trains an hour. 4 trains per hour is certainly better than 2 trains an hour, but it's, you know, we're talking about a very high population density area here. You really need to bump numbers to get people out of their cars, and this isn't me complaining about the proposals put here by this team. This team is balancing the political requirements. It's the political aspiration to really radically scoop out long distance, you know, non-stop long distance services, just obliterate those into non-existence. The best railway is one where you've entirely segregated services out so that you have long distance services on their own tracks, and you have suburban services on their own tracks, and because you can build the alignments, you can maintain them differently because those have different requirements, different maintenance requirements. There's lots you can do. Mesnelman, is saying, could you avoid Birmingham New Street for some by using Stetchford, Aston, Bescot, then up north, Birmingham International to change for BNS? I think something like that is what they end up proposing. Hold that thought. Hold that thought on that one. We'll keep pumping forward. So, so this is suggesting that they kind of pull local services to New Street into Snow Hill. There we go. So looking at the kind of on this one, it's like, we have to provide fast Leicester services. Provides improvements to Peterborough journeys, although a second train per hour east of Leicester requires improvements. So it's not like this is where it starts cascading out into the rest of the network, because the whole network is ultimately completely interconnected. Water-Orton Corridor Strategic Advice looking at how to factor in freight and local passenger operations in the Sutton Park line. So this is understanding how on earth you make this all. Again, it's a very difficult. It's a difficult corridor. The TSS, which is the strategic kind of train specification, train service specification, is what that means. It doesn't indicate which services should operate Derby to the northeast and Nottingham, as this will be heavily influenced by decisions involving HS2 and the IRP. The structure itself is largely insulated from IRP, as IRP will only affect how far the trains operate beyond Derby. It's just dealing with the Derby problem and the Eastern Leg problem is that HS2's Eastern Leg solved a lot of problems as it was originally proposed before the IRP ballsed it up. And the IRP balls it up completely, not least because it screws over everyone by hogging platform space at Nottingham and Derby. People are asking, actually, it's an interesting question from Nucker. How much does this stuff apply to every other city in the UK? It applies very heavily to Manchester and Leeds. And to a lesser extent to there are other bottlenecks where this applies, but the other ones that are really... Birmingham is the most complicated, actually. Manchester is second on that list, and then Leeds is actually a lot less complicated than Manchester and Birmingham. Manchester and Birmingham are both very complicated. It's less... Leeds is less complex as a network. The challenges are certainly still there. The bottleneck is absolutely there, but the Birmingham is the most complicated, followed by Manchester and then Leeds after that. Glasgow has a lot of complexity as well, actually, but to a certain extent, Glasgow has the benefit of having low-level stations that help quite a bit. Hindland Junction is still a severe bottleneck, for example. Actually, one of our earliest rail narratives was talking about bottlenecks, wasn't it? Excuse me, sorry. Right, if I tell you what, let's drink a little bit of fluid. So, we're halfway through. We're not even halfway through this document, so we need to make some more headway. I'm going to continue. I'm going to whiz through because we're kind of repeating ourselves. I'm going to go through, and you can sort of see the emerging picture at these. So, for example, this is now looking at the routes this is from New Street down the University, and then there are two. In fact, let's get Open Rail Map up. The two lines being looked at there are these two here. So these kind of loops. So you've got the Camp Hill line here. You've got the line via University here, the Cross City line that runs down this way. But these two form this sort of it's not really a triangle, is it? It's sort of a weird floppy balloon shape. But this kind of loop, this kind of arrangement here, there's two paralleling lines here, the Camp Hill and, if you like, the University line. I know it's not called the University line, but I'm calling it that anyway. Actually, we can zoom right in and it'll tell us what it's called. Yeah, I suppose it is the Birmingham Gloucester line, but anyway, it's the line through University. That's what I know it as. But that's the two of them here, and in this, so let's just jump back again. So let's see. So that's showing, yeah, King's Heath, Moseley, and then round, and then coming around into. So this is where these two chords would be. By the way, it's here. So you have the two chords, one going, allowing the services to run up into Moore Street. So that's what would be the enabler there. Because at the moment the services continue and they go onto a chord that then leads them unavoidably into New Street. Well, the point is that you get the chord here and then they run up into Moore Street and expanded Moore Street, and also beyond into Snow Hill and onwards where they need to. With another chord going the other direction to enable other types of service, but we'll get to that shortly, I'm sure. Anyway, so fine. So there's also all sorts of stuff. Also, yeah. National Freight Routing Study to identify alternate routings for freight traffic away from the Lickey Incline to enable higher tonnages and more capacity for passenger services. Boo to the Lickey Incline. Right, so Birmingham, Lichfield, Walsall, Rugeley, the Black Country. Right, so this is, again, a bit more complicated. This is but these are broadly regional and for the most part suburban routes. And I'm hoping that what they propose is some pretty high frequency stuff at this point. Yes, so we're looking at also lots of this is like to do with Commonwealth Games 2022 stuff as well. Lichfield has operated a 6 train per hour frequency for a number of years. That's across City Line. Find their aspirations to operate services from Lichfield to Burton via a new station, Alroas. Alroas. And longer term, there's a desire to reinstate the railway from Walsall via Brown Hills to Lichfield. Oof. So there's some long-term aspirations there. Golly. The train service on this corridor is constrained by the availability capacity at Proof House Junction at the east end of Birmingham New Street. Ouch. And the western approaches to New Street from Soho South Junction. Utilising the Bordesley East Chord means that services on other lines can be diverted to Birmingham Moore Street, thereby enabling access to the east end of New Street for an increased number of services on this corridor. So this means that you get a regular 4 train per hour calling pattern calling at all stations, supplemented by a 2 train per hour semi-fast service at Lichfield. So still possible to provide 6 trains per hour at all stations on Cross City North, but it's not possible to also provide a semi-fast service alongside the 6 train per hour pattern. Okay, so there's the story here of how you tidy all this up, how you make it all work. So there's considering those the rail corridors and how to actually make that work. So there is consideration of reinstating, services along former rail corridors and how you actually end up making that function. And then out down to Stratford and to Leamington Spa, the kind of the down into the soft country. Yeah, so this is, again, some of this is intercity-ish type stuff as well. So yeah, there's again more complexity. We get the diagram up, you can see. What's interesting is these bits of local line here that run down, on the way to Stratford upon Avon. It's just, yeah. And then you've got the regionals here in green. So the yellow is the locals, the greens is the regionals, just in case you hadn't worked that out. You can see Solihull acting as the hub here because it's got all calls. Yeah, it's a similar picture, isn't it? Just busy and complicated and messy. So let's see. Birmingham, Worcester via Kidderminster. Stourbridge as well. Hooray, Stourbridge. Yeah, so this is a back route, really. It's not on the main route, but it's benefit from a 6 train per hour service for a number of years. This corridor for the most part, local routes. So you get a pretty decent set of calls down to Kidderminster from Moore Street and Snow Hill. So it's decent suburban connectivity, and then you kind of snarl up into all the fun stuff at Worcester. Yeah, Starbridge Junction here having a decent service, and then yeah. Also, what's interesting is spotting the aspirational. So they've marked up here where a path could be extended to facilitate aspirational connectivity. So Walsall via Tame Bridge, or to utilise a metro corridor to Wednesbury. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's a very similar picture, isn't it? So there are plans currently, or Worcester is being re-signalled at the moment. That's kind of an ongoing plan. Again, former rail corridor study. What about Nuneaton, Coventry, Leamington, Spa? So this is our, including Kenilworth and other places along here, the weird single track bit between Leamington and Coventry, kind of not entirely Leamington and Coventry. It's an excellent cross-city suburban line ruined by being diesel, says Martha. Oh, the Kidderminster bit. Yeah. Flywheel go burr. Yeah, absolutely, on the old Starbridge shuttle, quite. A lot of this is right. Okay, so there's Coventry area strategic advice needed to look specifically at that picture and how to cater for the aspirations. So this is that corridor, and you can see coming from this is the Birmingham bit down to Cov, where you've got the long distance services that then run through to Leamington Spa. You've got the long distance services, and then you've got the local services through here, Coventry Arena, and so on and so on. Yeah, I guess there's just not much more they can do on that, because you're just limited in what capacity you've got for where the services go in other directions. So this is kind of all you can get. I guess that's doubling the track between Leamington and Coventry is an obvious thing to enable a second long distance train per hour. So that's necessary. It would also enable a station at Warwick University to be constructed without significant risk to performance and timetable robustness. So that's good. There are two key constraints to deliver improved services. Single track is one, and track layout and shortage of platform capacity at Coventry Station itself. So Coventry Station is emerging as a key constraint here as well now. So that's causing headaches. Coventry Station causing serious headaches. Walsall to Water-Orton via Sutton Coldfield. So we're getting there. What time is it? 20:53. Good grief. Harry Meow is saying double track Cov Nuneaton, absolutely. Single track Cov to Leamington Spa, carrying low distance Voyagers. Well, yeah, quite. Let's go back to that diagram. Yes. Yes is all I can say. That you've got that kind of, you can see the mix exactly. In fact, Howard, exactly as you've described. In fact, so let's keep going. So this is this bit. This is interesting. So Sutton Park Line, currently freight-only railway, providing a key route away from the central Birmingham area for freight to access all routes. It's a key regulating corridor for local and national freight flows. Fine. There's an active project looking to build a new station at Aldridge on the west end of the line to provide services via Walsall to central Birmingham. There are aspirations to return passenger services to the route, initially at Aldridge and subsequently on the rest of the route. As the line is not a radial route from Birmingham, journey times will be longer compared to other suburbs, and therefore providing rail connectivity which is competitive with other transport modes could be a challenge. It should be assumed that the route will need services to central Birmingham from each end as a consequence. So this is this line here. It's this bit of railway here. So, Birmingham Wheels Adventure Park. Why is that showing up so dramatically dark on my thing? So, it's that's very Monty Python. Sorry, let me just exactly confirm which bit. It's this bit coming around the back. So, yeah, this bit here, this bit of railway. So coming around Sutton Coldfield, Aldridge, Walsall, and then back into, is that right? And then back through into, yeah, so connected, so through Walsall and then connecting back into the kind of the existing network at that point, kind of the existing passenger network at that point. And the logic is that you could achieve this. Could provide a useful alternative to both the West Midlands motorway network and provide an orbital service linking radial route. Yeah, London Overground style, absolutely. Don't underestimate the benefits of radial routes that don't necessarily connect into the centre. Martha's counterpoint is it doesn't need to go to Birmingham, but needs to run high frequency, at least 4 trains per hour to be a successful orbital route that relies on convenient connections. So then my query is, what's going on here? Why is it not running the high frequency in the middle bit there? Although it's all 4 trains per hour, but then it's only 2 trains going through. I don't know. So that's not enough capacity in central Birmingham to be able to operate services from the Sutton Park line to Birmingham via the Waterline corridor without this restructuring. So it's optioned. It's an option to be considered. Worcester area and Great Malvern to Hereford. We don't need to whiz through this. This is Worcester has pretty rubbish connectivity to in-city destinations. I'm kind of like, well, that's fine, so long as it's got decent high frequency services, regional services. It doesn't need to have super good long distance services. Anyway, there we are. We don't need to say much about that, to be honest. There's a North Cotswold Line task force business case. Good golly, that's exciting. So, maximising central Birmingham capacity. Let's see what they say here. So we're page 90 of, what was it, 290 or whatever it was. So there's former rail corridors that could be used. Walsall Lichfield is an option. Wednesbury to Walsall. Could operate as an extension of the new metro line, but the potential for heavy rail freight should be considered in this section. Any future proposals should investigate the potential for technological solutions to enable access to the heavy rail network of Walsall. Yeah, don't convert all the disused railway lines into the flipping tram. Tram's a tram. It's not good for high capacity or for journey times. Trams are good. Trams replace buses. Trams should not replace trains. Anyway, so existing network. Yeah, okay. Right. So former rail corridor that's used by metro services and disused line bits of railway. There's quite a bit of all of the above, as you can see. Marvellous. I'm always nervous about trams taking over heavy rail lines because probably a train would be better, but anyway. Right, so this is a section on getting across Brum. So they're talking about the East Chord providing the option. So the East Chord here, so let's go back to Bordesley. So the East Chord is about providing basically providing, well, I suppose it depends what they're calling the East Chord. Is the East Chord on the west side, or is the West Chord on the east side? It's fine. I'm sure they'll put a diagram in a minute. The diagrams will help us, I'm sure. So fine, explaining what the fact that you can split things out and they start talking about line identity. This is exciting because it's quite good to be clearer about what services people have and service options. So they're starting to go, well, actually, you could start doing something quite clever about what services run where, and people can understand where they're going. So start going, okay. It's important to note that the identity proposal above is purely indicative. It's a suggestion of how services could be identified to make the rail network easier to understand by creating clear distinctions between local and long-distance train services. And they should be branded West Midlands, absolutely. Martha's more optimistic about trams and orbital routes in secondary cities. Again, you're depending on connections, and a tram every 5 minutes can be a better service than trains every 15 to 30. Yeah, that's a fair point, Martha. That's a fair point. So, here's the indicative end state train service specification providing east-west connectivity across the West Midlands. Smethwick Galton Bridge being this hilarious, enormous hub, which I always find funny because it's just a ridiculous place name. It's a ridiculous station name. Look at this. There's Snow Hill. And then there's this kind of, they've hidden the stuff that goes elsewhere. Yeah, okay. So, and then this is the north-south connectivity and how that ends up working. You can see the bit that we just talked about of the two sides with the university there in the middle as well. I mean, these are broadly clear of each other, because the key thing, you kind of want these flows to be distinct from each other, and this is where this comes from. This is where you end up with this diagram here, which I put up as the tease last week about this episode. And you end up with all that. So let's zoom in on this. Actually, first of all, let's it's prospective local network line connections, identities for cross-Birmingham connectivity and indicative end states. Let's zoom in and have a look, shall we? So you've got these sort of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, U as well for the weird extra bits, unidentified bits. So you kind of end up with this sort of indicative view of what the network is doing with the hubs and with services going in different directions. I quite like it. It's aspirational. You know, it's like, no, this could work. This could be good. It's not as aspirational as obviously I would like it to be, but it's, you know, there's someone with a bit of a vision and an ideal of what a suburban network could look like for the West Midlands, and it's good. It's good. I like it. It's aspirational but realistic. Why is Stafford not in the West Midlands but Leicester is? Pass, Matt Baker. Right. Whole West Midlands network view medium term. So this is looking at local connections. This is now looking at the wider West Midlands network. And good God, there is the end state train service specification. Delivers on the combined aspirations in the medium term for the West Midlands network. And wowzer, does it. Good grief. There's consideration of bits of, you know, former rail corridor to help. Trent Valley services to be determined, which is interesting. That's HS2 related. That is something. Yeah, crikey. There's not much more to say on that. Interchange between central Birmingham stations. This is where it's going. How to maximise the usage of the rail infrastructure to deliver as many of the aspirations as possible. The need to exit one station and use public rights of way to reach another station. It's a major obstacle to an integrated and easy-to-use public transport system. Absolutely right. And Curzon Street and New Street being miles from each other. You know, they're a 5-minute walk, but a 5-minute walk means a lot. That does mean a lot. You know. Howard Meow is very unhappy about ignoring Lichfield Dudley Stourbridge connectivity. Howard, you need to complain to Network Rail about it. So yeah, the connections between public right of way that provides the pedestrian route between New Street and Moore Street stations is unwelcome with poor wayfinding across busy roads. A significant obstacle to out of station interchange. It's necessary to undertake work that better ties these two important railway hubs to each other and in turn to HS2 station at Curzon Street, as well as the tram and bus services that serve these stations. Absolutely. So that's critical. It's just a bit of a line of we need to do this. Freight. Now, I don't want to whiz through freight, but I'm going to whiz through freight. But to be fair, they also whiz through freight. They're talking about some of the key blockages, but they do say, look, we've provided an aspirational level of paths. Role of Midlands Rail Hub. Right, fine. This document has established the potential that can be unlocked across the West Midlands by remapping and deconflicting services as a result of the Midlands Rail Hub scheme. This is kind of the Midlands Rail Hub scheme is kind of those two chords and some of the other bits of work going on that enable this. And in theory, it's funded. I mean, it's not, but the theory is that Street had brought that funding in, but now he's gone. I don't expect that funding is going to evaporate as a result of that, but anyway. Yeah, so there's discussions of the fact that there needs to be consideration for new fleets as well, electric fleets, and the benefits of electric traction to replace a lot of the diesel traction. In fact, that it's critical. So that it needs to be an increasingly electrified network around the Birmingham area. In fact, the majority needs to be electrified. So, so this is talking about additional central Birmingham capacity enabled by the provision of both east and west chords. So the chords at, but yeah, the extra chords that you get. I'm trying to see the diagram. Which let me just concentrate my head where the diagram is. Yeah, fine. There's New Street. Yeah. So the chords. Where are my chords on this one? Some of these diagrams do bounce around a lot, and I'm trying to spot where. Just no. Oh, okay. So they've just done the. Okay, it's just because it's a straight line there. Fine. Okay, fine. Oh, fleet and station implications. So, additional EMUs required. This would suggest the future standard configuration for local rolling stock will be 6-car, 23-metre vehicles, so 138 metres, fine. Because 150-metre train lengths are basically the limit, because, basically, like, there are several areas where the suburban network stops trains from being lengthened, which is always a massive, painful problem and often very difficult to fix. But often worth spending that money, to be honest. Discussions with the rest of the fleet, so that's fine. So whatever, fine. Level boarding, look at this. Level boarding. Currently, no train fleet in operation in the West Midlands offers level boarding opportunities, although there are examples of such capability elsewhere on the UK rail network. Level boarding, marvellous. Look at this. Look at this. I know that good people who listen to Rail Natter wrote this because they've talked about level boarding, which is very good. Benefits and number of accidents, all this stuff. Inclusive railway, reputational benefits, reducing passenger risk, benefits the reduction of accidents, slips, trips, falls. New fleets investigate the possibility of level boarding options to deliver on all the benefits, such as marvellous. So this is good stuff. And then pair it with AFA, of course. So then the recommendations. Fine. We don't need to, we've kind of looked through this with this sequences for prospective future modules of strategic advice. So this is saying, well, there's the strategic advice for some of these big problems. So there's a Wolverhampton area problem, Stourbridge corridor problem, Longbridge problem, Solihull problem, Coventry area problem, and Orton corridor problem. So all these problems, and then all the different connections between them. And things that need to feed into each other, along with the pan-regional stuff. So you can see this, and then also there's the former rail corridor study as well going on. So the Northwest and Central team are they're juggling a lot of plates at this point. Have we missed an opportunity to have the street fleet for the West Midlands rail network? Howard, I fear we have. Yes, decarb of the network. Well, as we all know, decarbonisation of the rail network is not very important. Decarbonisation of our transport system requires us to have a electrified railway, because that's what gives us a better railway that doesn't just maximise capacity but also reduces the cost of running that railway. So it's just talking about the fact that there's a lot of routes that need to be electrified to achieve the 2050 target. Lots and lots. And it's talking about, there's some discussion of bimode and cross-country being a problem and all the benefits of electrification. So it's big on electrification, but also important to think about power supply. You can't just think about putting the wires up. You need to improve the power supply, which can be a pretty substantial bit of work. So this then details all the route sections that require electrification. So here they all are listed out. Very nice. And it's how to eliminate. It's sort of saying, actually, to the point where they're saying, they're kind of talking about what order you could do it in as well to eliminate. Diagram of the route sections for incremental electrification to deliver decarbonisation in the central and west-south network. So it's basically saying that this is, you wire this stuff and you get rid of diesel operation entirely off the network, which is good stuff. And that's exactly what they're talking about here. Yeah, fine. So so it's basically saying, how do you get rid of these fleets? How do you replace these fleets? What bits of railway need to be electrified to replace these fleets? It's good stuff. It's a really good section. So the 172s, they're a bit older. You need to electrify these bits. You need to electrify these bits to get rid of the 165s, which are quite a bit older. And so on and so on. It's good. It's some good stuff, and you can see kind of how much needs to be replaced, what the fleet looks like, and how that replaces. It's quite a holistic view. This is doing the stuff that you'd think that the Roscoes would take a proactive view of this. No, of course they don't. They don't give a shit. Anyway, so there we go. So that the long-term view. What are we learning about the long-term view? Needs to be additional capacity. Beyond this point, additional capacity is needed to deliver the next step change in rail capacity connectivity. Most constrained corridors route is Cov, Burham, Wolves, and there's just the conflict between long distance and local services. It just has a significant negative impact on the optimum capacity and prevents improvements to local services. If additional corridor capacity is provided, this would allow some better spacing of services, but would still come up against the hard limit of capacity at New Street Station. So actually, from looking at this, then what we need is maybe less a Crossrail and more a high-speed avoiding line running, just basically bypassing New Street, or maybe having an alternative set of platforms at New Street. But perhaps that could have been achieved through platforms at Curzon Street and routing stuff that way. That may have been the option, and that opportunity perhaps has been lost. A little bit of a lack of long-term thinking perhaps in that planning, but anyway. So there's a good bit of stuff about kind of long-term optimization. A new station in central Birmingham would be required to provide capacity for these enhanced corridors, and should look to provide direct access to New Street, Moore Street and Curzon Street concourses that will improve the access between the stations. So pretty bold statement there. New central Birmingham station can be optimized to have higher entry and exit speeds, which can make a significant difference to journey time compared to the approaches to New Street, which are pathetic. So that's quite bold and interesting. New street acts as a performance buffer along distance services, absolutely. New central station opens up the opportunity for improvements to other corridors that could benefit from a new station that better supports intercity traffic. The most obvious of these is Longbridge, fine. So the big statement, here we are. As a result of existing rail geography, it's very difficult to provide Redditch with better connectivity. It lies at the end of a commuter railway to Birmingham. As a town with a population of nearly 90,000, the lack of regional connectivity to anywhere other than Birmingham and the slow journey times hamper the ability to make major inroads into modal shift from road to rail. Very, very useful and valid point to highlight. A new higher speed railway corridor from central Birmingham could avoid the Lickey incline, provide a mainline connection to Redditch, and provide faster journey times between Cheltenham and Birmingham. Some bold, what would be nice is to list all these off. That's some pretty bold statements in there of new things to do. So, new central station, new line on the Cov Brum Wolves corridor, possibly tying into that new station. And then potentially a new line out to Redditch, which is which is very interesting. So there you go. Further work is required to understand the feasibility of providing such connections and where such a station could practically be located in central Birmingham. It's important that initial scoping of this is carried out to be able to inform land use planning and strategic planning further into the future beyond the scope of this document. Well, maybe there's a future rail narrow in there to get this out. Everyone's shouting Birmingham Hauptbahnhof. Look at this. Mesnil Man is saying waves and says Stetchford Aston again. Well, indeed. So, there's some appendices. Fine. There's lots of data here showing growth. There we go. Discussion of in fact, what is this? What is it? Worcester area constraints and roles of the stations. Okay, so just looking at the different stations and what their roles are in that area. Fine. Decarbonization route sections. Yeah, so how they've prioritized which service groups run on which line and which corridors to then prioritize. Okay, so that's fine. We don't really, 3-letter station code glossary, fine. Decarbonization prioritization. So how's that? There's your ranking, and that's the end. That's it. That's it. So the question I have then is, what do we think? What do we think of all this? Harry Harrison is just suggesting turning the entirety of Birmingham city centre into a train station. Yeah, strongly agree with that. Let's do that. Legend has it the very early HS2 proposal was for a mega hub between Curzon and Moore Street. Well, that's kind of what it'll turn into anyway. Planning Birmingham Hauptbahnhof while still building Curzon Street. Well, indeed, Rob. Is it a missed opportunity, or was it just creating a station that? Yeah, I don't know. I think mistakes were made in the design of Curzon Street. I understand why that station solution was chosen, but I better things could have been done with that, but it is what it is. Now planning around an alternative. What would happen to cross-country through services? So that episode, I suspect episode 222 is the episode when I'll talk about what the UK's completed high-speed network should look like. And we'll talk about what I think you do with cross-country at that point. But you don't need services to look quite how they do now, because if you're running, you don't need to run everything into Birmingham if you're running some stuff just into Birmingham, some stuff through and beyond. So there are options and alternatives. Lul60 is saying, or possibly Lu-I60, apologies. Feels like there are a lot of strange unused stuff that could help a lot. Stetchford has 4 platforms, could it not be used with big pathing lines to name passes out to Cov? Quite possibly. Martha saying it comes back to the problem that HS2 shouldn't have been the planning effort responsible for the city centre stations. That should have been a matter of metropolitan area transport plans. Yes, this is the problem. One of the key problems with HS2 is that HS2 should have provided the funding and the wider strategy and the connecting things between nodes. But the design of the nodes should have fallen down to the likes of the team who just developed that. Because if that team had developed what the city centre station should have looked like, we'd have ended up with a station that actually achieved kind of more of what it needed to. Absolutely a shortcoming. Martha Lauren, look at Germany. You've got high speed in historic stations in a lot of cases, and then suburban move to new tunnels. Yeah, which is kind of the easier way to do it because it's long. Yeah, it is an easier way to do it in a sense. Please make episode 221 about getting rid of the Voyagers. 220 or 221 are absolutely going to be cross country related for sure. Yeah, Martha would say, yeah, you've got new through stations like in Berlin. Yeah, I think this exposes that key shortcoming in how HS2 is developed. Absolutely, for sure. What else have I got to say? Let's see, what else is going on? Note that cross-country through services to Manchester are run by Voyagers on diesel under the wires all the way to Coventry, while those same Voyagers struggle to provide capacity on that line. Yeah, I know, right. It's a mess. This does require a government with an interest in infrastructure investment or thinking about the future in any way whatsoever. Yeah, absolutely, everyone. Keep tracking thoughts. I'll do some wrapping up, and then we'll maybe do a bit of a closing words. What would my Birmingham Crossrail look like, Aidan G? Ooh. Well, I suppose for me it's understanding what you can do to bypass Birmingham New Street on the Cross City Line, because the Cross City Line has to go through New Street in a really awkward dog-leggy way, and cross diagonally across the whole thing. But actually, that becomes less of a problem if you're kind of running services. For me, it's getting as much out. New Street is a pig, so the more you get out of New Street, the better. I think that the way I see it is if you can skip that, then great. But actually, maybe there are better ways to do things. And indeed, we've seen. I'm trusting the team. We've just talked about what they can do with the network. What they're actually talking about is that a better solution is perhaps thinking about further long distance segregation. Could that be achieved by just eliminating long distance services and finding alternative, delivering those that connectivity in different ways? Possibly, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see. New Street just needs to be. I don't exactly splitting New Street into two levels might be useful, because if you can put the Cross City Line going through without having to cross the slow station through, you could improve Cross City Line journey times tremendously. Simple. If anything that goes through New Street, the journey times are horrible. They're wrecked by, and they talk about in the report, by the 10 mile an hour speed restrictions. We haven't done the episode of there is an episode. Well, no, how to make trains go faster. Way back ages ago, the episode we did on the fact that the best way to make trains go fast is to stop them going slow, and that is absolutely true in the case of Birmingham New Street. So yeah, like remodeling, reducing the number of platforms so that you can get rid of a lot of the S&C and improve the alignment such that you can bring the speeds right up would help tremendously. Shortening platforms, actually, so you don't have to worry about long distance stuff, and you prioritize it as a suburban station, but it should be a suburban station. And Moore Street would become the regional hub, because then you've also got the connectivity across from Curzon Street into Moore Street. I am not going to be in Leaving on Sunday, unfortunately, but Howard Meow is asking, I'm hoping to be in Leaving on Sunday for the new bit of railway line opening. What's the scope for modal shift on journeys between Edinburgh, Cameron Bridge and Leaving if this line does not create capacity? We have to do something about Leaving, won't we? Yeah. We'll talk about Leaving at some point. Yeah. I need to have a think about how Scotland has problems with how it's looking at rail at the moment. We'll come back to that one. Lule 60. Would any of this be realistically feasible given the disruption from it? I mean, there's always disruption, but if we're afraid of disruption, we'll never get anywhere. We'll never change anything. It's absolutely, that's not me slagging off your question. It's a spot on question, but we have to think big involves thinking about inconveniencing people in the short term, because we kind of have to do that. Martha Lauren points out that it's a good job Labour has committed to doing absolutely nothing. Yeah, I look forward to the. I very much look forward to their manifesto coming out and talking about what they want to do aspirationally. That'd be nothing. I am very much hoping to do a rail natter where we speak to the Shadow Transport Secretary and transport representatives of everyone but the Tories. Everyone but the fash parties, basically. So, forget the Tories, forget Reform. But basically, Greens, Lib Dems, Labour. It'd be interesting to see what they all have to say about transport. So, everyone. This podcast is available in all good podcasting platforms. It's possible. You can go and listen to it if you do. And for those who have, thank you. I cannot remember whether I'm actually now an episode behind. Things have been a bit chaotic. I need to go in and put this and the previous episode up. I'm sorry if I haven't already. If you're listening to this a week late, I will be doing that as soon as I possibly can and try and get us back up to speed. Yes, so patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for supporting me, doing more of this. Thank you so much to all of you who support me. It's so valuable, particularly at the moment. It's very glad to have all of you supporting. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise, all the merchandise that you can imagine. Suggestions very welcome for new things that you might want to include. The Build HS2 Now tops feel, well, actually, you know what? The general election, maybe that's absolutely a spot on thing to to be wearing. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and abuse, and GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the chat to continue ad infinitum. Everyone, what a joy it is to have you all with me. Always a pleasure. Next week, it's a bit of a news episode, but we're also going to be talking. Well, in fact, the episode is titled "Everything We Can Say About Haxby Station." I've got quite a bit to say about Haxby Station. So let's talk about Haxby Station. Episode 217 should be an interesting little discussion. I think it'd be nice to chat about it, but also a few bits of news here and there as well. Yeah, that's that basically. There might also next week be another an engineer plays. There's a few bits of stuff I need to build. Haxby is near York. Haxby is a station be the next station along out of York on the Scarborough line, and for various reasons, it is the train operating companies previously have had no interest in it because it just screws up their services, or rather adds a few minutes of extra journey time. But that's not going to be a problem long term because fairly soon the Scarborough line is going to be a branch again. It's not going to have any through services, so that'll make everything much easier because you can add as many stations as you like, and all it does is extend the end time journey, which doesn't matter if you then increase the frequency by a train. So, which is what I would suggest you do to improve the generalized journey times. So, on that note, everyone's saying things. Lul60 is saying a major problem would be the weight limit, though. Apparently, New Street can barely support the weight of Grand Central above, so remodeling would require the whole thing to be demolished. It's a mess, folks. It's a real mess. Yeah, New Street's not good. It's really not good. There's a lot of problems. Let's put it that way. Geotechnically around New Street Station that cause quite a bit of headaches. Lul60 is saying Aussie the Bull puts it all on the absolute limit. Yeah, I love the idea of them building that thing and the Bull they attach the last bit of faux brass fitting onto the Bull, and the thing just falls straight through the floor onto the tracks below. That would be I'm almost sad it didn't happen. Anyway, so there are two new stations planned with an X in the name. The other one in Bedfordshire. What? Okay, this is getting niche now. Right, enough of this. Everyone, I'm going to wave vigorously and say goodbye. We're 23 minutes late for an hour of finishing the episode. Damn it. You're all right. We ended up going long. Ugh. Anyway, right. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. See you next time. See you next week. Bye-bye.